At one time or another, you may have given someone the silent treatment, where you shut down, you're quiet. You have an argument, you don't want to discuss it. The Rambam explains when the pasuk says, Lo sisna es achicha bilvavecha, don't hate your brother in your heart. Usually we understand that means you shouldn't hate people. The Rambam seems to understand that it means you shouldn't hold that hatred in your heart. Holding it there, quiet, without talking about it, makes it fester and get worse until it sometimes comes out in violent ways. Instead, the Rambam says you should go over to the person, tell him you bothered me, this is why it bothered me, this is how it made me feel. And when you start to open that conversation with that person, you start to recognize them as a person, you start to set that conflict on the path to resolution. The Rambam brings the example of Avshalom. Avshalom, whose half-brother Amnon violated their sister Tamar. And he was so angry, Avshalom, over this, that the pasuk says he could not speak to Amnon for 2 years. And he held it in, and it got pent up. And eventually, he said, L'chuv v'nahargehu, he commanded Amnon to be killed. And that is what we have in this week's parsha. The brothers angry at Yosef for his superiority, for him telling tales about them. And velo yachlu dabro l'shalom, Rabbi Sachs brings, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz explains, velo yachlu dabro l'shalom means they could not speak him to peace. Speaking with him would have brought peace, but they couldn't speak to him, period. Not that they couldn't say a kind word to him, as it is sometimes explained, but lo yachlu dabro, they couldn't speak to him, shalom, which would have led to peace. And instead, it built their resentment for Yosef, l'chuv v'nahargehu, until they said, let's kill him. We each have disputes, small things, big things, spouses, children, family members. And it's easy sometimes to shut down ourselves and ignore the other person and not engage and not bring up that uncomfortable issue. I had it recently at work. I did something someone wasn't happy with. They did something I wasn't happy with. And normally I would have just kept to myself about it. But this time I spoke about it. I confronted the other person. Said, hey, I don't think this was right. And it's a hard conversation to have, but it's the way to move past these issues. And the Baal Simcha today is someone who exemplifies this. He's on the neighborhood association. Most of us here, we would rather not think about what our neighbors want or care. What bothers them doesn't bother us. But this Baal Simcha goes out of his way to hear them out, hear their side, have them hear our side, and that's an essential. It's essential to maintain the peace in the neighborhood. So he's a Kiddush Hashem that we can all learn from. Of course, there are times that we have disputes with enemies. Those are not civil disputes, enemies who are set to kill us. And then diplomacy is not the answer. Speaking about it doesn't help. Sometimes there is only one path. But for these civil disputes, which come up all the time, these interpersonal issues that annoy, that bother, that fester, the path, the lesson of the parsha is to speak and to be able to use that speech as a path to reconciliation that will bring all of us closer together. Too many times we feel like there's polarization from community. This type, that type, speaking about what we think, what they think, brings us all closer together, brings us closer to the unity that is a prerequisite for the Geula Shlema.